Welcome back to Strength 101, the podcast where we break down fitness and nutrition into its simplest form so that you can get the results that you want. Hi, it's me, it's Nick, and I'm back. Today we're going to talk about something that's always a thorn in my side. Can kettlebells really build muscle? And for some context, for those of you who are either newer to the podcast or have never been to our gym, I run a gym that uses only kettlebells. We use it for 99% of what we do. We don't have any dumbbells here. We don't have any machines here. We do have some barbells that we use sparingly, but it's very rare. It's very shocking, honestly. I don't think many people have seen a gym that only has kettlebells unless you've been to an actual kettlebell-specific gym, which is very different from what we do. We are not crazy about kettlebells, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Before we start the podcast, you're probably wondering, where the F is my trailer talk? And I know some of you are wondering that because I've gotten several messages and people asking me in person, hey, I was looking forward to my trailer talk episode. I like to listen to it. Where the hell is it? Well, we decided to branch that off. This is the Strength 101 podcast, and we have branched that off into its own separate podcast so that we have some creative freedom to do more things with it. And so what you want to do is you want to go into your podcast platform and search trailer talk. Stetler, what does the graphic look like? Okay, it looks like a chalk drawing of a trailer and says trailer talk. Very simple, simple and elegant, like Stetler does everything. So that's where you're going to want to go. You're going to want to follow, subscribe to that podcast so that you get those. And by the time you are hearing this, it should already be up and running and there should be 1 to 2 episodes out. Go do that. But today we're going to talk about whether kettlebells can actually build muscle. And if you're a member of this gym, you already know that they can. And today we're drinking a Zoa. I have no idea. I've never seen this brand, but I picked it because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is on here as a jacked Santa. And I totally thought when I looked at this, man, if I drink this, I will look like him. And so we're going to see if that happens. Excellent. Okay. So if you guys were ever wondering, how do I build muscle the fastest? How do I more effectively build muscle? Do I need to use different implements? Should I be a barbell person? There's a lot of people that are really strong that use barbells that have a ton of muscle. Should I use machines? There's tons of bodybuilders that use specifically just machines and they're freaking jacked. Or maybe dumbbells are the answer. I've seen a lot of jacked dudes lifting dumbbells too, but I don't think very many people think about the kettlebell and think I can grow muscle with that. And that's for a lot of reasons. The kettlebell, here's how I got introduced to kettlebells. I'm not a kettlebell zealot. I own a gym that is 900 square feet in this gym. And we use only kettlebells because literally I popped up out of bed one night when I was planning this gym and trying to figure out how we save costs on the amount of space that we lease and the amount of equipment we purchase. What if we used only kettlebells for everything? Can we squat with them? Can we deadlift with them? Can we press with them? Can we row with them? Can we do all the basic things with them and be effective just using one implement so that we don't have to buy 3 times the amount of equipment, spend 3 times the amount of money? And so far, it's worked out really well for us. And today we're going to go into why. Now, I first got introduced to kettlebells when I was working on the fire department. I had never really used kettlebells before. I mean, I'd used them before. I'd done some swings before. I'd coached people on swings before. But the thing I want to preface here is that, guys, load is load. Your body, like at the muscular level, does not know whether you just picked up a kettlebell, a dumbbell, or a really heavy child. Like it just doesn't know the difference. And so to your muscles, load is load. And that's what's really important, because the fundamental thing you have to understand about growing muscle is that you have to cross an intensity threshold in order to actually build muscle. You have to actually signal to the body that it is not big enough, it is not strong enough, and it needs to adapt and grow to the stress that you are putting on it. And the reason that kettlebells get such a bad rap is, I think, because of how they were used. They haven't been popularized as a heavy weight. As I'm looking over at our kettlebells right now, we have them all the way up to 150-pound kettlebells. We have a set of 150s, we have a set of 124s. But if you go into a regular gym, you're going to find maybe they top out at 35 or 40 pounds. Maybe now that they've gotten a little bit more popular with MMA training, Joe Rogan talking about them, just kind of the internet breeding more information, I think that you're probably going to find some heavier kettlebells at some gyms, but most of the time it's going to top out at like 50 pounds or something like that. We have people that lift double 150-pound kettlebells for deadlifts, and that's like a 300-pound deadlift just with kettlebells instead of with a barbell, and that is just as effective on the muscular level as any other implement. But like I said, when I first got introduced to kettlebells, it wasn't for muscle building purposes. I was on the fire department, and I had started getting into kettlebells because I needed a way to get in quick workouts. I was at one of the busiest stations in the nation. I think at one point, this station was the 4th busiest station in the nation. It was right in the middle of a ton of retirement homes. And so we went on a ton of medical calls. Now, I spent 7 months of my probationary period at this fire station. And you just didn't know when you're going to get a call. Like, you could not bank on getting a solid 1-hour workout in really anywhere on the fire department, but especially at this station. And so I was like, well, how am I going to get some workouts in? I had hurt my back at one point a couple years prior to this, and I was still rehabbing from that. My hips weren't rotating super well. I wasn't feeling really good. And I found that the fluid motion of doing a lot of things like kettlebell swings, kettlebell cleans, kettlebell snatches, it was really effective for me to be able to move a weight without stopping for a good 5, 10, 15 minutes. And without going crazy heavy so my body could heal, and just getting a lot of movement, a lot of blood flow. And so when I first started using kettlebells, it was almost more of a rehabilitation tool than it was for muscle building. And I think that most people, when they see kettlebells or have used kettlebells in the past, they've only used them at really light or moderate weights for doing things that are more cardiovascular. Let's say I'm going to swing a kettlebell for 1 whole minute, and that's going to get my heart rate jacked up, but it's not really going to do anything for me muscle wise. And it's not heavy enough for me to build muscle. But you see the 50-year-old lady in the corner using it. You don't see the big muscled guy pressing a 90-pound kettlebell overhead, just because there's other implements to do that with. So if we think about what was the first popularization of kettlebells, they come from Russia. Pavel, I can never understand how to say his name. He's been interviewed on some of these podcasts before. Really popularized using the kettlebell as a tool. I believe they used it in some of the Russian military, and it was used in exercises that are considered very traditional kettlebell exercises. Kettlebell swings, kettlebell cleans, kettlebell snatches, kettlebell presses, maybe some rows. You can use it for a lot of things, but in traditional kettlebell training, they are often using moderate weights, and they're trying to move them really fast, and they're doing things that are swing oriented. And so that means that there's a lot of momentum to the kettlebell. It's very reaction based. It's very power based. And that's excellent for a certain type of training, like getting your heart rate up, keeping the muscles active, but it's definitely not the best for producing muscular growth or, looking like a strength athlete or looking like a bodybuilder. So like I mentioned earlier, it's really important to remember that you must cross an intensity threshold if you're trying to build muscle. And it doesn't matter which implement you use to do that. And so the way that we teach our members how to do this is, if we're doing something that's really high repetition and it's a movement that is safe to do, we want you to push all the way until failure. So that means I'm going to push as close to failure as possible. I'm stopping either because my muscles literally cannot push the weight anymore, or the burn is so much and it's so painful that I have to stop. At lower rep ranges, let's say right now in our gym, we're doing a program that's a lot of 5x5s. We're coaching people to go until they have 1 to 2 reps in reserve. And so they should feel like, okay, when I get done with 5, I maybe could have done 6, I maybe could have done 7, but I definitely couldn't have done 10 or 15. And pushing to these intensity levels ensures that you're going to signal to the muscle that it needs to grow. And using too light of weights is never going to get you there. You can't use light weights and just do hundreds and hundreds of reps and get the same results as far as muscle size and gain is concerned. So if you are going to use kettlebells for your training and your goal is muscle mass or strength, the first thing you have to do is make sure you're picking up heavy enough kettlebells, which if you don't have them at a gym, then use a different implement. But if your gym does have kettlebells that are heavy enough, let's give them a shot, because you might really like it. Now, the movement pattern matters a lot too. I mentioned that a lot of what popularized kettlebells is these swings. A lot of people, the thing that drives me the most nuts about the kettlebell circles is people who do kettlebell tricking. Because one, I think it's stupid. It's kind of like ribbon dancing with kettlebells. It's people who, there are these kettlebells, they call them competition kettlebells, that the kettlebell that weighs 100 pounds and the kettlebell that weighs 10 pounds are the exact same size. So if you're watching an Instagram reel, they look like they could be the same weight. And so lighter kettlebells always look like you're using a big implement, because it's like a big plastic shell with like sand or concrete in it or whatever the hell's in there, or it's metal or thickness of metal, or however the hell they're built. But people will take these kettlebells that look heavy but are actually light, and then they'll toss them around. They'll do tricks through their legs like they're a freaking Harlem Globetrotter, and they'll toss them in the air, and they'll catch them on their hand, and they'll toss them over their shoulder like a Continental Soldier. It's just dumb. Like it looks cool on Instagram, and some people who are jacked, like literally they're shredded and they have huge muscles, are doing this stuff online, and somebody who doesn't know enough will watch that video and think, this person is jacked and they're tossing a kettlebell around like a fool. That must be how they got jacked. When in reality, the muscle was built from doing traditional exercises at high enough weights. And now this person is just doing tricks on the internet to make themselves look cool, when in reality, it has nothing to do with how they actually built the muscle. When we first started using kettlebells for everything, I was concerned that we weren't going to either like it or be able to do most of our core exercises with it. But I was actually really surprised. Some of the things that I find kettlebells are actually better for, especially for beginners, one is deadlifts. I actually think deadlifts with kettlebells, much like a trap bar, is a safer version of deadlift for beginners than a barbell is, because you can actually take your hands and get them in line with your feet better because the bar doesn't have to stop at your shins. It's a safer deadlift variation than with a barbell to use a trap bar deadlift. And a trap bar deadlift and a kettlebell, a double kettlebell deadlift with the kettlebell sitting on the outside of your feet, those are very, very similar exercises. And we have people who can lift really heavy without that extra strain of having to reach forward and over the top on a regular barbell deadlift. Now, can you lift as heavy? Not necessarily, because eventually the bells get so big that they just get in the way of your legs. But especially for beginners, if you're a personal trainer out there, or you're somebody who's just getting into strength training for the first time, the kettlebell can be awesome for teaching you the deadlift. The kettlebell can also be amazing for the front rack squat. Now, you are not going to get close to what you can actually do on a squat with kettlebells. But what I really love about it for beginners, especially in our gym, or if you're teaching people how to lift for the first time, is that they are going to be limited on the load that they can put on their lower back and their legs by what their upper back can handle. And so you're promoting that you have to have full body strength in order to hold these kettlebells on the front of your chest before you can overload. You can load up a machine or load up a barbell super, super heavy, heavier than maybe you can stabilize, and then you go down into a deep squat, you round your back, and all of a sudden you're hurt for 6 months. And that's less likely to happen with kettlebells, at least in our experience. Bench press actually works pretty well with kettlebells. It's not the best. It's not super comfortable. The kettlebell presses on the back of the wrist. And so I don't absolutely love it for that. We would love to get some dumbbells, but I still think that it's better than barbell bench press for pec development, because you can get deeper, you can get past the chest without the barbell hitting, and you're not locked into a restricted range of motion, which is what happens with the barbell on bench press. You'll notice, actually, if you look around at like power lifters and strongman competitors that are really, really good at bench press, it's like none of them are winning a bodybuilding competition for their chest muscles. That's because bench press makes you good at bench press, or at least barbell bench press makes you good at barbell bench press. It doesn't necessarily develop phenomenal pecs. That's something you need excess range of motion for, and I think dumbbells and kettlebells are actually much better for it. The one thing I do love the kettlebells for chest work is pec flies, because you just imagine it, like the kettlebell is actively helping pull your arm out just the way it sits in the handle. And so I find that I really love them for exercises like that. I also really like it for things like overhead press, because you can just set the kettlebell in your hand and it sits there really nicely, and you don't have to think about stabilizing it side to side like you would with a dumbbell. And then obviously, compared to a barbell, you're just going to have more full range of motion than when you're locked into one implement with both arms. Now, here's some exercises that I don't think kettlebells are phenomenal for helping build mass on. One would be like some of our shoulder work other than overhead press is really difficult to do. I think that it's easier to use dumbbells. It's easier to use plates to do this work. And we actually do bring in plates for a lot of our shoulder work. Something like lateral raises with a kettlebell, just the way that the handle sits doesn't feel very good. Trying to do like front raises and stuff with them just doesn't feel as good. Curls is probably the biggest thing. Like trying to do curls with kettlebells just doesn't feel right, because the weight rotates around your wrist in a strange way, and it doesn't ever feel like you're able to get that peak contraction at the top like you can with a dumbbell or with one of the mini barbells. So we actually bring easy bars into our gym to hit a lot more bicep and tricep work. But generally, we've been open for 3 years now, and this has been a grand experiment to see if we can put muscle mass on people using only kettlebells, and the experiment is a resounding yes. We have seen people stack massive amounts of muscle on their body using only kettlebells. We see that across the board with our members. One area in particular where I think we stack amazing amounts of muscle mass on with the kettlebells is the upper back. We have, especially our women in here in the gym, and I think it's because so much deadlift, so much front rack squat. We do a lot of pull-up variations. We do a lot of row variations here. but the upper backs on some of our women who are low enough body fat to show it are seriously insane. Like I could go around our gym and just record upper backs all day and you'd be like, shit, how do I get that type of results? Well, kettlebells actually helped with that. And I think in a way that using other implements don't help with it, because you're always relying on your hands to hold the kettlebells, even in something like a squat. Now, if you are trying to become as strong as humanly possible, the kettlebell is not going to be your jam. Okay, it might get you through your first couple years of strength training, maybe 3-4 years, whatever that is. But if you're somebody who is really aiming to be the strongest in the world at something, you're going to have to use barbells. You're going to have to use some of those implements that you can load hundreds and hundreds of pounds on. Now, barbells, I think, are by far, barbells and barbell-like implements are by far the best for building the strongest humans, just because of the sheer load you can put on them, but also because you're locking into everything bilaterally. And so there's not as much unilateral work. As far as building muscle is concerned, I still think machines are highly underrated. All these machines have different ways of isolating these smaller muscles so that you can actually work on the shape of those muscles. And it's just a much safer way to get high volume training in. Smith machines get shit on all the time. And those are machines that, yes, they get crapped on all the time because everybody's like, oh, they lock you into a specific movement pattern. It's not functional training. What the hell is functional training, guys? If your body can do it, it's a function of your body. Okay. So I'm done hearing about what I just somebody described to me what the hell functional training is. There's whole systems built on this. F45, functional 45, CrossFit. We focus on functional fitness. Like if your body can do it, it's a function of your body, guys. But the Smith machine, I'll tell you, I got some of the nastiest quad workouts of my life using a Smith machine, because how else are you going to take a super narrow stance so that you can hit your teardrop muscle on your quad, drop it to full depth without some stability provided by the Smith machine? That's a rant for a different podcast. But don't sleep on machines, guys. Don't buy into this functional methodology where they say that like you should be doing everything in space. Like that might be true if you want to be a professional athlete or something, but most of us who just want to look good naked, you should use the machines available to isolate the muscles that you want to grow and want to look better. Dumbbells I would put on the same like kind of plane and category as kettlebells. That, you know, they're phenomenal for pretty much everything. They provide an awesome amount of freedom of range of motion. The only reason we didn't go with dumbbells instead of kettlebells is like kettlebells allow us to do things like clean snatches, swings, which are super helpful for our HIIT classes and for our power programs. Lift heavy enough weights, choose the right exercises. If you're doing those, lift heavy enough weights, choose the right exercises that actually promote building muscle mass. If you do lift heavy enough weights and choose the right exercises that actually promote muscle growth. If you do lift heavy enough weights and choose the right exercises that actually promote muscle growth. If you do those two things, you can't go wrong. It doesn't matter which implement you choose. Guys, if this was helpful, I'm laughing because I just screwed up so much, and hopefully Stetler calls all that or cuts all that out. Yeah, just keep it in there. Just 3 times saying things. Guys, if this was useful for you, please find somewhere with oh my God, please find a place where you can tell us that this was valuable information, a comment, a message. Jesus, come in here and make fun of it. If you get this far in the podcast, go to one of our social media platforms and say, what the fuck happened to Nick's tongue? Guys, if you found this information valuable to you, please go find one of our social media platforms. Let us know, or give us a suggestion on something I could talk about that is valuable to you. You can find us at Strength101 on Instagram, at Strength101 on YouTube, at Strength101 on TikTok. And then remember, you got to go and find our new podcast, Trailer Talk, if you want the crazy, unhinged, hilarious side of us. Guys, this was Strength 101. Peace out.